Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be walking you through how I plan a photo shoot from start to finish. So from the moment I start even thinking about a photo shoot to when I'm selecting, editing, and sending off the photos, I'm going to take you step by step through it all. This process differs a ton from photographer to photographer, and even for myself from shoot to shoot. For example, if I'm taking, concert photos or engagement photos or self-portraits, the process of planning and going about shooting those things looks a lot different, but I'm going to talk you through kind of what you see mainly across my Instagram and here on YouTube as well. But I'm excited to kind of talk about this today because I feel like everyone can kind of appreciate a good final still image, but there's so much that goes down before that image is shared, and small decisions like the location, the model, the styling, lighting, there's so many things that could go into it that all make a huge part of that final photo. So the very first thing I did for this shoot in particular, and a lot of the time when I'm going about kind of figuring out what I want to shoot, is start to look up just different inspiration for the kind of lighting and concept I want to move forward with. I'm a very visual person, so I like to just see things in front of me, and then from there I can kind of flesh it out on paper or on a board. For me, Pinterest is a great place for this because you can kind of collect all of these images that you're sourcing inspiration from and then put it in kind of a singular board. And a lot of the times I'll see an image that I'm inspired by, but it's not something I want to necessarily recreate myself, but more so kind of take particular elements from that and then kind of throw my own twist on that. So again, just like a board, having all of these images in one place to refer back to is a great start. It could definitely get a little tricky because I feel like when I go into my shoots, I have a lot of different kind of ideas. I'm not always just set on one particular look. If I'm gonna be spending money on a space and a team to shoot an image, I really wanna walk away with a lot of variety and not just kind of shoot one thing and then be like, cool, we're good. I'd rather take advantage of the resources that I'm kind of putting together. And in this shoot in particular, a lot of my inspiration was surrounding a new light that I got. I feel like that's the cool thing about inspirations. It can kind of come from anywhere. It could come from a song, a photo you saw, a music video, or even just a new product. In this case, again, it was that light. So I was looking to create something with a really unique sort of projection and pattern, and then also move forward with something that felt really clean and soft. Sometimes in this case, if I'm going for two totally different looks, I'll create two different types of boards because they look and feel so different. My next move was kind of thinking about a color palette that I want to move forward with. And sometimes this is drawn from an outfit or the lighting. And for this, I was kind of going with a sort of pink and orange color combination. But this is something I hold off on until I kind of lock down a model, just so I can really confirm that kind of color palette will complement them. So for this shoot, I reached out to my friend Monique, who I met through just shooting. We've shot a few times before this shoot that you'll be seeing, and she's also a photographer herself, so she shoots a lot of self-portraits, and she always just gets it. I feel like if you're in front of the camera a lot, but also behind it, you just have this superpower that you kind of know what's going on at all times on a shoot. So I thought she'd be absolutely perfect. After she gave me her availability, I was kind of able to lock down a certain date that the shoot would be on. And then after that, I started to reach out to different people who I wanted to bring on as well. I referenced all these people in my previous video, but once again, my makeup artist Evgenia, the stylist Lennon, Fritz, who was the videographer, and then my friend Emily, who kind of played the producer / assist role. I got super lucky here because all of these people that I just mentioned were first of mind that I wanted to kind of reach out to, and they all were free. And I was like, I feel like I just assembled the Avengers. And for outreach here, it definitely helps to just be super upfront and clear on what you want from that particular person. So providing things like the shoot date, the location, the time you would need them from. And if you also do have a budget, this is a great place also to share that as well. I know that even for me, I don't want to get involved in something quite yet if I don't know everything about it. And it just kind of cuts the conversation in half if you're just able to kind of throw it all out there instead of them having to be like, could you tell me more? You're already providing all of that. From here, I started to communicate with them kind of individually about what I would want from them in more detail. This was also a great stage for me to share kind of the mood board I was working on so that they can kind of get and visualize what is actually gonna happen. Because I feel like you could be thinking a lot up here, but until you kind of explain and visualize it to them, they're not gonna understand that. And this part was kind of done weeks in advance because I knew that I wanted to go the route of having styling and makeup and stuff, and all of that kind of takes time to figure out before the actual shoot date. So within that kind of few weeks before the shoot, I was talking a lot with Lennon, who was the stylist, about kind of what looks we wanted to move forward with. And she was able to kind of craft a PDF of a bunch of different looks, and I was able to kind of confirm or give feedback on certain things, and we were able to kind of communicate from there and figure out 2 really solid looks. And with the videographer, it was a little bit more simple because of the kind of work I wanted from him. I really just wanted like a handheld kind of personalized feel on like behind the scenes of what was actually going on. And so he kind of took that and brought whatever gear kind of he thought would work best with that. And then with makeup, just sending through another individualized board, or just sending through an image or two that really pinpoints the vibe. Especially if they're a really good makeup artist, I feel like they can most likely recreate something you send over. And so I feel like getting really detail oriented with makeup and hair too is better to do than not. After all this communication and locking down everyone's schedules, this is when I finally booked out the space that I wanted to shoot in. For this, I always use Pure Space. Especially here in New York, there's so many spaces that are available for renting just for like a few hours, and Pure Space is a really great place to kind of see these spaces and exactly what you're getting. So a lot of the hosts will kind of have everything laid out of what will be in the space itself, and a lot of the time they'll have like backdrops for you or like V-flats and tripods, and that's also great for me, so I don't have to bring as much gear on the day of the actual shoot because a lot of it is already there. This is literally not a Pure Space ad, I just actually use it. You can go about and like message the host for things that you want as like extras. So a lot of the time I like to kind of pull the seamless backdrop down to a point of where the model will be standing on it, and so you'll usually have to pay an extra like 10 or 20 bucks if you do that, and you can just chat with them before on the color you want and how many you'll be using that day. Sometimes for the larger spaces they'll have a minimum of like 3 hours or 4 hours. I've seen spaces on there that have a minimum of like 10 hours because they're kind of looking for a larger productions kind of team to go in there. I don't have that big of a team, so I think this time I just rented it out from, I think it was from like 12 to 5 I had it. For this one in particular, I picked a space that I've already been at before and shot at because I wanted to be pretty familiar with kind of how it works and how the lighting looks during those times that I'm there. For different test shoots and just playing around, I love to kind of book a new space and figure out what I could kind of do in that new space. But for this, it was like a little bit higher stakes, so I wanted to pick something, again, that I knew. So after the host kind of confirms how many people will be there and kind of what I want to go and shoot there, you could totally do this without thinking about the space, but I don't know, I feel like for me, I really need to kind of visualize where I'm gonna be shooting. If you're shooting a space that has floor to ceiling windows and you can't cover that up, that's gonna be a huge factor into the lighting in your space. So thinking about like what time of day you're gonna be shooting at to kind of counteract that is definitely necessary. Luckily, the space had curtains, so I was able to kind of control the light better by kind of blocking that out a bit. Some of the light was still coming through, which is completely fine, but I know that's kind of a big deal for some photographers, is creating a space from no light and then building it up from scratch kind of. Something I do now, and kind of as of recent, as my lighting setup started to get a little bit more complex, but like not even, is sketching out what kind of lighting setups I wanna kind of produce there. For me, this just like completely helps because instead of just getting to the space and figuring it out then and there, when there's so many other things to worry about, I'm able to just kind of like exist and like actually have a good time because I can refer back to what I already planned out in those sketches. So I'll literally like bring this with me on the shoot day and refer back to it if I need. So those are kind of all the like pre-planning things I'll do before a shoot. But now let's talk about the actual shoot day itself. On the shoot day, if it's a longer one, I'll usually bring some like water and like little snacks for everyone. Especially if you're there for like 3 or 4 hours, like everyone's gonna start to get hungry and you just wanna like be that person to like have the snacks. It always works out. So I'll bring that. And then also, as I'm starting to like invest in more lights and gear and stuff, I have just come to a point where I have too much to bring in like an Uber or like on a subway to the space. So I've started to just drive myself to where I'm shooting, which sounds like, okay, you drive, like so does everyone else. But I feel like in this city, like in New York City, not everyone drives here. So like but it makes sense because it's like hectic and I always have to look for a parking space, so I have to get there way earlier and just trying to secure one of those. And so because of that, I like to get to the space before anyone else. So if I book a studio at 12 p.m., I'll tell everyone to get there at 1. And that's just so I could, first of all, find parking. Second, bring up all my stuff, because sometimes I have to make like 3 trips. A lot of studio spaces are up like many flights of stairs. There's just like so many things you have to counter in. And so I don't want to be doing that all when like everyone's just waiting around for me. Like one time I got to a space and the seamless backdrop just like fell off because I kind of had the roll go down too far. And so I had to take like an extra half hour to just even like figure out how to put it back up because I was unfamiliar with like their setup. So as I was kind of getting myself all ready to go, that's when everyone else started to arrive. So Monique got right into makeup, and then Lennon threw her into one of the looks that she prepared. For this, like I had like lighting in mind, but I feel like there's always things that will just happen on a shoot day that you can't necessarily plan for that sometimes actually help the photo along. So for this, I knew this space had really great colored backdrops and cloth backdrops, but I don't know, I felt like because we were putting Monique in this like really bright orange and pink look, that an orange backdrop would just kind of make it all come together and kind of just full send it with that orange. The lighting I used this time around was Nanlight's Forza 300B Spotlight, and I attached that to a projection attachment I also had from them. I also decided to use a gobo as well to create this really cool looking pattern. If you're unfamiliar with what a gobo is, they basically just refer to any device that casts a shadow to go in front of a light. So in this case, for the projection attachment I was using, I basically had these small stenciled circular discs, all with different shapes and patterns on them, and when I place it in line with the light, it then controls where the light is going and where it's not. I also had this RGB panel light off to the side of her to give just some additional light there. I also ended up taking away the gobo and letting the spotlight just go full out. And again, decisions like these, from what kind of gobo I was using to actually using the spotlight, those aren't things I was necessarily thinking about beforehand. They just kind of came to be while I was on location there. So yeah, I feel like a lot of what I'm saying sounds very planned out, but I feel like you need to leave a little bit of space for play when you get there. That, I had Monique stay in the same look, but just moved her on over to this white seamless backdrop. For this lighting setup, I had taken the spotlight off of the projection attachment and then locked on a modifier instead to have a more diffused but still really strong light source. And I had this bounce off of the white side of this V-flat to spread it out even further onto the model and the backdrop.
This is only the beginning. Warning.
So after we take and finish all the photos at the space, I'll usually leave like 30 to 40 minutes of time to kind of wrap up. And once I go home, I'll then sort of make my selects. I don't always make my selects the day of. I'm usually like running around that day. So usually within the next few days, I'll go on Adobe Bridge and kind of go through and pick out my photos that way. You can easily like star your favorites, and just, it's a great like organizational tool for that. I used to just use like my Finder to pick out the ones I liked, but this feels just more clean. And then from there, I'll just spend hours and hours editing them. I'll definitely usually like sit on a photo for a while. So I'll like make a few tweaks to it one day, come back to it the next, or few hours later, I like to hop around and come back to a photo. I feel like there's this pressure to kind of like get back, quickly edit, like post or like share to a client. But every time I've done that, I just always regret the edit or the selection I made. So I've learned to just be patient with it in the process. And then for sending off photos, I use WeTransfer or Dropbox. I feel like if I'm just like texting a link to like the team that helped or like the model, I'll usually use Dropbox. And then if I'm sending it off to a client, I'll usually do WeTransfer. That way you can kind of see when they download it. And then you could also just make sure they're getting everything high quality, not necessarily like screenshotting a Dropbox photo that they see. You know, they're actually like getting the real file from me. And then obviously I'll go about posting myself. I'll find a caption. I like to kind of organize the photos and how they'd like sit in a carousel, like in an album in my camera roll, because you can kind of like play with the positioning that way. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe learned some more about my own process of how I go about photo shoots, and maybe you can kind of take things that I do and start to implement them into your own photo shoots. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.